Hello and welcome to NORA.startup. Glad you took the time to drop by our webinar today or in the future when you see this recording on our website. At the time of this recording, it's a beautiful spring that has just started arriving in Norway, and some Norwegians trek to the mountains to catch whatever remaining snow they can find. For the last few webinars, we have often asked AI startups what they think. And this startup, we have decided to flip it around to get the perspectives of two researchers within the field of artificial intelligence. In this webinar, we will explore innovation-based research approaches and learn from a researcher's perspective on getting in touch with startups or other companies and how they have approached this dialogue. This is NORA Startup webinar, and I will be your host today. The researchers will present themselves and share some of their activities and struggles in collaborating with startups and companies. The webinar ends in a plenary discussion on shared interests, challenges and possibilities, and how we might get even better at helping each other in this field. So how can we help both researchers and Norwegian AI startups in their journey to see them prosper in the future? Let us find out. First, let us start with a round of introductions. I will begin, followed by the introduction of each member. My name is Alex Moltzau, and I work for NORA. I'm currently studying a master's degree in social data science at the University of Copenhagen. My interest lies within AI policy, ethics, and I also have a background from helping to run an accelerator focused on pre-seed startups and ran a small company. So I will now give the word to Rodica. Could you give a short presentation of yourself?
Yes, thank you, Alex. My name is Rodica Mihai. I'm a senior researcher at NORCE Energy. I have a PhD from the University of Bergen in algorithmic graph theory, and I've been working for the past 10-11 years with automation and autonomous drilling.
Okay.
Do you want me to take? Is it the introduction, I guess?
Yeah.
Michael first says, yeah.
So Michael, could you also tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Michael, and I'm from SimulaMet, and I'm a chief research scientist there, and I work mainly on AI in medicine. But I'm also interested in a lot of other application areas, so not restricted to medicine, but my main interest lies there. I have my PhD from the University of Oslo and came to Norway, I think, 2014, so quite some time now. Yeah, and that's it.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you. The first one to present will be Rodica. So the floor is yours, Rodica, or the Zoom is yours.
Thank you, Alex. I share my screen. If you can bear with me.
Okay, I think we lost Rodica there, but Michael, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you have been doing recently?
Yeah, so I can just talk a bit about my interaction with industry. So mainly I'm doing research in AI medicine, but of course there are a lot of companies that come and kind of want to work together. Especially lately, also just getting some advice how to do things and how to approach different things. So I'm also sometimes checking companies for investors to kind of see if they should invest or not. I had several of these experiences too. And yeah, I kind of like it because I see it, even if I see myself mainly as a researcher, and I'm kind of interested in what the companies drive and have a good kind of, yeah, that they grow and give something back to the society. But I'm not really interested in building my own company because I think I'm a researcher by heart. But anyway, I see it as a kind of way of giving back something to the society by the things I learned in my PhD and also my daily research work. So some of the bigger companies I worked with was, for example, Labelbox, which is a company from the US that contacted me, I think 4 years ago, or maybe 5. And they had a very interesting idea. They wanted to build a system to segment data for AI tasks, which I found really interesting. So at the start, we kind of helped them a bit on developing some of the methods and so on. And then later on, they got a lot of extra funding, and now they're quite big, and they help a lot in kind of creating more data for the community, which I think is really nice. And what they also do, which I really like, is they provide for researchers usually their services for free, which is also a great initiative. And then I also worked with some, and still working with some Norwegian companies. So, for example, Future Ready and Augere and Rescue. And most of them, they're focused, of course, on medical things and AI, which is my main field. But Future Ready, for example, they are also working with something completely different. And when I'm focusing with, or when I'm working with companies, I'm usually trying to focus on the things that I feel are usually not done well in industry and AI. So these are the evaluation of the algorithms, which is often done, I think, very poorly, not just in industry, but also in, for example, medicine in general. So it's often that some people make some model, usually based on some tutorial from the internet, and then evaluate it quite poorly and say, oh, we solved cancer detection. And then if you go into the details, how this evaluation was done, you kind of see this doesn't hold in a real world scenario. And even the big companies like Google and so on, they fall into these traps. So you see a lot of these cases where Google said, oh, we can do this with 99% accuracy. And then they went to the hospital to try it out, and it didn't work. So that's kind of a pitfall a lot of companies and also startups fall. Then another thing I usually try to focus on is that startups in general are, I think especially startups, they like to kind of promise a lot of different products, which can be nice because in artificial intelligence, you can tackle a lot of problems with a lot of different tools and methods. But I feel that often this kind of gets a bit out of hand. So usually I think it's important to focus on one specific goal and try to find the one method that can solve this problem, which doesn't have to be the most complicated or most complex method. Often you don't even have to use, for example, deep learning to solve an analysis problem. And then the last thing I usually focus on, which is really important for myself, and often also is the reason why I decide not to work with companies, is open data and open source. So I think also for companies, even if the data can be a kind of valuable resource of the company that you might not want to share, it's really important that we share data and also source code so that we can really build comparable and reproducible results, because that will also increase the quality of the systems we build. And also in medicine, where it's usually hard to share data, you can find ways to share data. For example, you can create synthetic data that you can share, which we're doing with someone from Denmark. Or you can build systems where you don't share the data, but you allow others to test the algorithms on your data and so on. And also, I personally think that sharing source code also for companies, it's quite clever, because in any case, if you don't have this really super duper algorithm that no one else will figure out ever, it's really easy to copy things that you do with deep learning or things like that. So I don't really see the point of not sharing and being open about the work, because anyway, someone can copy it anyway quite easy. where you get the real value for your company, I think it's the combination of all the different aspects of your work, and also, of course, the people you work with. So if you work in medicine, that you have good contacts to the hospital and to the doctors and so on. I think that's the main things.
Okay, thank you so much, Mikael. That was incredible. I mean, it touches upon a lot of the things that we will get back to in the plenary discussion. And I will now give the word to Rodica.
Thank you. Let's try again. Of course, Murphy's laws. My computer restarted just when I shared my screen.
It happens.
Yes. I will just. Yes. So I'm, as Alex said, I'm Rodica Mihai. I'm coming from NORCE Energy, from the Drilling and Well Modeling Group. And NORCE, this is NORCE. We have 1,100 employees at 10 different locations in Norway. We have 6 research areas: energy, technology, social sciences, health, climate, and environment. And we have 4 university owners: University of Bergen, the University of Stavanger, University of Agder, and University of Tromsø. And we are 40 different nationalities and a lot of projects, because we are a project-based research institute. Means that we don't get the basic funding from the government to support us entirely. So we are dependent of acquiring projects, either 100% finance from Research Council or EU, or joint industry projects, or 100% finance from the industry projects. Our market is, this I have a short list, so it's not only that, it's much longer than that, but these are some main tracks, if you want to call it like this: oil and gas, and it has a renewable energy, which took quite an important role during the last years: marine and coast environment, maritime and transport rescue, agriculture, medicine and health, air and space Earth observations, and process and metallurgy. I took up some of the market parts where we implement AI technology. I'm coming from the energy department, from the drilling and well modeling group. As I mentioned, we are 18 people with a long track of working on research in drilling, on automated drilling, and recently autonomous drilling. The group leader is Helga Gjerstveit, and we are based in Stavanger, Bergen, Oslo, and Kristiansand. So we were quite used with digital meetings also before Corona times. But let me tell you something about us, about the group competence. We have domain knowledge within drilling and well modeling. And so drilling is quite generic. Most of the projects were for oil industry, and we are also focused on geothermal drilling and drilling in other applications for renewable energy. We are having competence in mathematical modeling, domain knowledge in drilling hydraulics, drilling mechanics, drilling fluid mixing, drilling methodology, and software engineering, and also testing and validation, because it's not always easy on how to test an AI system. It's not, in our case, since we're focusing very much on automated system and autonomous systems, it means that it involves online decision-making system. So it's not always trivial on how to test that on the best way. Because, for instance, if we have the data, that's fine. But when we take a decision, when the algorithm is taking a decision, we would like to see the effect of that decision. And this is not always something where we see the effect in the offline data of the field data. Because let's say we get some real field data from some provider, and they drilled the well, and then the driller took some decision at certain times, but it's not necessarily what our algorithm would consider as the optimal decision. So it might also be that our algorithm takes completely different decision, and both decisions are good enough. So if we test our algorithm with respect to some historic data, we will never see the effect of that action because it's a completely different setup. So in such systems where we want to test what is the influence of an action decided by the decision-making system on the environment, it's important to have an adequate test environment. And this is something that we build for drilling, and I will touch that also in a slide later. We have competence on control, and since I put some lines on the artificial intelligence, some I also mentioned before, is the online decision-making system, automated reasoning system, auto-calibrating, self-calibrating models, where we are into the deep machine learning, swarm optimization, and so on. The list is much longer. And based on the competence, I tried to find something newer, but this is what is the latest one. So I wrote NORCE Energy here, but at that point we were actually IRIS, which became part of NORCE. IRIS stands for International Research Institute of Stavanger, which is now integral part of NORCE. So the groups which are here are not necessarily the same groups which are today in NORCE, except our group, because it was unchanged. So the Research Council made an evaluation for the basic and long-term research within engineering science in Norway. This is from 2015. So you have on the x-axis, you have societal and industrial relevance and impact. On the y, you have the scientific quality and productivity. So you can see here the square where we are. So innovation definitely is very important for us, and application and benefits for the industry stands high on the list. But let me tell you something about the history behind this, where we end up here in the scale. This is for Norwegian, is in Norway, and there are universities and institutes. The round circle are the university, and the square are the institutes. So I take an example from a product which is now commercialized by Sekal, which belongs to Sumitomo Corporation now. And the idea came out of what is called in 2000 Rogalandsforskning. Afterwards, it went into IRIS. It changed the name to IRIS, and now it went into NORCE. So it started as an idea how to help, how to assist the driller with an automated system. So it started from the paper and the pen, and then it went with the prototype. At the same time, we developed the test environment I mentioned before. Then we went for a joint industry project. We have several major players in the industry. We had the first test on our own lab in Stavanger. And then we went for a first offshore test at around 2009-2010. And we have permanently installation in use offshore. And it went all the way to the first offshore pilot on a floater. And just to show a bit about the complexity of the problem is, so when you run on a floater, it goes up and down, so the peak to peak to 6 meters. So this technology is about helping, it's an adaptive technology, adaptive system, and it's considering what is happening downhole. So think of how your data is looking when you are moving up and down, and you have a long string, maybe, I don't know, 10 kilometers. Think about the uncertainty and the availability of the data when the algorithm needs to take a decision. So this started as an idea. It went down a startup company which belonged to IRIS, and it went out with external partners. And then it was the company was sold to Sumitomo Corporation 2 years ago. What is important is that we, for the entire time, we had a close collaboration with the SECAL. So it was a win-win situation because it helped us to continue our research and to develop more and more and more and to achieve greater capabilities in the technology. At the same time, it helped SECAL to be always in the research front. Because when you are a technology company, it's very important to have the latest on the market, you could put it. And of course, as I said, we are dependent of our partners, and we want our partners to see the benefits in the technology. And also for us, it's nice to see that the technology is working as it's supposed to. So this is building trust between partners and the startup, which is now not the startup anymore, and the research institute. Just shortly, if I have time to just say something about the testing environment. So as I said, we build up what they called Open Lab Drilling, which is a virtual rig. And this is, we use it for testing our own technology, but we also have quite a lot of collaboration projects with either startup or larger companies who develop new drilling technologies, because it costs a lot of money to test something offshore. And it helps to have several iterations in a new virtual environment before going for larger tests. So what we usually do with new automated technology, we usually have several iterations in the virtual environment. Then we go for the lab rig and then potentially to an offshore deployment. And this is saving quite a lot of money and efforts for the startup companies when developing a new product, because they can just go back and reiterate, and it will add also trust in their product in the long run. Yes, I would like to thank you, and I'm looking forward for the discussion.
Okay, thank you so much for the presentation, Rodica. And I think we'll bring back Michael and just have a more general discussion. Yeah, if you could please put on your videos, both of you, that would be great. Thank you so much. Okay. By the way, we now have the chance to ask any questions to Michael and Rodica. So, if you want, you can use the Q&A section, or just write your question straight into the chat, and I'm sure Michael and Rodica will be happy to answer any questions you might have. Okay, I think I will just start with Rodica, but almost 20 years from idea to product. That's a long journey, but that's the time it takes sometimes. Like, how long were you involved with this kind of project?
I joined the team in 2010, so I can say 11 years.
I see. Wow, that's quite some time. And Michael, just to throw it over to you, because you mentioned like you got involved with with a smaller company, and then it grew quite a lot to become a larger company as well. So could you tell a little bit about that, and how long have you been involved with that company?
So I was involved maybe around a year at the start, and then as soon when it started kind of to fly, then I saw kind of my part done, and then I moved on.
Yeah, but how long is that ago now? Is it?
So I think when they started, it was like, yes, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, and then it took a year until they really got a lot of investors, and then then I kind of moved out. And we still have sometimes like quick email contact, or if I need to use the platform for a project or something like that, I have kind of access there. So that's nice.
Yeah, because I think it might be interesting for the audience to understand like why is it so different for a research institute as opposed to a university. But I think you kind of mentioned it as well, Rodica, about this kind of role that you need to kind of it's a project-based institute, and that you kind of also need to collaborate as well with different businesses and startups. So so that kind of
so at Simula we are not really required to do that.
No. Yeah.
At SimulaMet we have the base funding, so we don't have to get money from company projects. So that's more kind of if we as a researcher want to do that. So we can be quite picky on with whom we work and how long and these things.
Yeah, exactly. So those kind of nuances are important for startups to understand, right? Kind of in how these different actors operate.
Yeah.
And if I can add to the fact, because I know it sounds, you asked the question and I said 11 years and then Michael said 1 year. So it really depends on what. So this was a journey because you keep adding all the technology and you have to think that this is a technology which is used offshore on many rigs out there. So now we are still involved, as I said, in joint industry projects with them. And this is a win-win situation. We get projects to work further on our research. It doesn't mean that you are working on exactly the same product. You always make that better. And this is all the levels, both the research and the implementation. But you need to have the research part. And that's why it's important to collaborate with the research institute and on these joint industry projects. So we are still planning to collaborate further in the future with them. So it will not stop here from our side, at least.
Exactly, and I was thinking about this kind of beginnings of who often kind of does the contacting. Do you get contacted a lot by companies, Michael, or like is it the other way around?
That's mainly I get contacted, so I don't really have time to contact companies, to be honest. So it's more like someone writes me or some of my former students, they might have an idea and start something, and then they usually come and ask for some advice.
Yeah, and from what I understand, like you have some kind of ways to approach this. What do you think of if you're going to start up this collaboration? What's the first thing you would do?
So first I would kind of check if the idea is interesting. That's kind of important for me. And then I would also try to understand, or what I'm doing is usually I try to understand is there competence in actually developing the methods. So in my case, it's usually about something with artificial intelligence, which boils down to deep learning. And then I kind of check there if the knowledge is there, or at least the talent to dive into this. And once this is kind of checked, then I'm also usually trying to find out early what about the data and kind of evaluation and open kind of reproducible results in this. And yeah, once all these things are checked off, then I'm starting collaborating and working together.
We have a question here to Rodica. Is the dynamics in the movement of the rig predictable?
No, not always. That's the beauty from the mathematics point of view, because the problem is highly complex. So then the research part is very interesting for us.
Yeah, I think it's. I think you're dealing with some really fascinating, problems, both of you, like and like how you're going to go about and solving those. But I think we were kind of starting on this path towards discussing maybe open data as well, and you're very passionate about that, Michael. But I would want to know from Rodica as well, like that data is with these kind of large companies and like with other actors. How do you kind of relate to that, or like what how do you approach this kind of data, sharing or not sharing, and there's a lot of questions probably from the company.
Yes, definitely. This is a very important topic, and data is very important. I know I mentioned the fact that for the testing, sometimes historic data is not the main way of testing a system, but for us, data is very important because it gives a domain knowledge, what can happen in the environment and so on. So, and of course, it's not always that the data is publicly available. We get the possibility to have the data shared with us. Sometimes we need to write confidentiality agreements with the industry partners. And of course, we do understand that. And as I said, it's still very important for us to learn the domain. So we appreciate the fact that they are willing to share with us, but we do also have some open data available because some big players, a company from the industry, decided to share the data openly. And we are also, our group, one of my colleagues is very actively involved in an initiative called Devis about sharing the data. This is an international initiative with the Society of Petroleum Engineers. Is both US, Norway, Europe, or there are quite a lot of major industry companies part of that. And this is building up a framework to make it possible, based on semantic models, to make it possible for industry to share data within the consortium.
I see. I think there was a commentary about what incentives do the companies have, and I think you touched upon it briefly, Michael, especially within kind of healthcare. I mean, you've been on previous webinars, so you also, I think your argument is quite pervasive in terms of that for kind of for humanity and for coming generations and so on, like what kind of benefits can we see from sharing data as well? This is I think broadly a really important question, I think, to ask oneself. But when companies kind of are a bit hesitant to share, how do you approach this, and like what do you see as the incentives?
Yeah. So I don't know what the incentive is for them, but then they will not work with me. So if they want to work with me, then they will have to do that. That sounds maybe a bit cocky to be like that, but since I can choose with whom I want to work, I can do that. But why I think it's important to share the data is, of course, for the common good of the humanity, but also to bring the field forward. I think it's really important because a lot of performance in AI systems can just be based on the data that you specifically use for this case. And that's why I think it's not enough just to say we get this performance on our internal data using these algorithms, because this doesn't really bring the field forward anyone else. So I think it's really important to kind of be open on this. So the incentive there is then also that you help to bring the field forward. And as I said at the start, it's really easy to come up with a copy of whatever you're doing. I just have to find the similar data and find some other hospitals, for example, to work with, and I can do the same as you do, and you don't share the data. I think that's quite simple in nowadays. And if you, I mean, you see often that people have new algorithms and think, oh, wow, this is groundbreaking for the next years, and a week later you get the new algorithm that outperforms you by several percentage. So the field is moving so fast that I think being closed and not sharing is the wrong way of making good products.
Yeah, it's it's really kind of incredible to see how fast the field is moving forward. Rodica, I was wondering about, on that note, is there any kind of researcher that you kind of think does really exciting work, perhaps even like outside of your field, or that kind of could be inspiring for startups to look at?
You mean on the autonomous system that we are working, or automated systems, or what are you?
Well, yeah,
if you
like
could go a bit more in details.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like, or maybe just more simply put, which researcher inspires you, and and why?
So yes, for the last 2 years, actually 4 years now, we've been very much into, as I said, autonomous decision making. And maybe I was not so what we are interested in that is not only correlation in the data, but we are very much interested in causation, because when we take an action, I want to see the effect on my world. So it's not the methods that we are using. I should clarify, is not purely data driven. We have a hybrid solution. We are also using physics-based models, because in this field you have to think what kind of data you have. So sometimes the data that we receive is either not present because we don't have the sensor to measure that, or is very much delayed. So if you have an online decision-making system and which needs to take a decision, and the data is available after the decision was taken, that is, of course, an issue. So for us, this is a very much interest to look into the data uncertainty, how that propagates in the decision making, the risk analysis, automated risk analysis, reasoning systems. We are looking a bit on the correlation part and on this standard machine learning algorithms. I'm not personally, that's not my main focus, but I'm also interested in that.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I think, you know, trying to understand the potential risk in like decision making, it's highly complex, and especially within the kind of environments that you mentioned previously. But Michael, for you, I'm just throwing this around, but like if there were, you know, which kind of AI company, like, or AI startup do you find inspiring? So so within the field of AI, it doesn't have to be health necessarily, but so is there any company that you're not working with at the moment that you think is kind of driving some positive change or doing some interesting in terms of research?
So yeah, for me, one of the most inspiring startups was this label box I already mentioned before, because they are really open and they also sharing their platform for research, which I think is really nice, because they got a lot from research and they also give it back, which I think is perfect. So for me, they are a very good example, and they're also very successful. So
yeah, so but I think I saw it on LinkedIn today that you have this kind of collaboration between LHL, Hjerneslag, Rescue Biometrics, and Stavanger University Hospital. So how did that come about? Just to give us an example of, you know, how do these kind of projects happen?
yeah, so this was interesting because there I basically got contacted from my former student from the Christiania School when I gave a machine learning course there. And he just asked me some advice, and then it kind of, yeah, we gave some advice and more advice, and then we wrote the project proposal, and yeah, now it's a fully fledged collaboration.
Okay, so that's great, you know. So so I mean, people that you know have trained, or people that you work with, and then, you know, they just find it so enjoyable to work with you that they kind of contact you, and then kind of these projects come about. So yeah, Rodica, like how does NORCE Energy go about kind of you know, finding new projects, or like how do they come to you, you know, or like could you tell us kind of an example of a new kind of collaboration that has happened in the recent years?
Yes, so in the field that we are, so we have quite some track in oil and gas. So when it comes to projects within oil and gas, we usually build up on existing project phase 2. So it's usually us with the idea, and we take that in discussion with the industry partners. Of course, when we go for now, we have an increased focus on renewable energy. And there you could also say that quite a lot of companies coming from the oil industry have also an increased focus on renewable energy. Then it's a bit easier to follow up dialogue because we are known to each other. But we are also open to new contacts. and discuss possible collaborations. So it's sometimes there are the companies approaching us because they would like to collaborate with us on a certain project. Especially this yells especially for small companies which have a product and they would like to either show the potential with the product or just develop more on the product. Or we initiate the contact. For instance, as part of a larger project, we sometimes see the need for, let's say, development or a sensor which is of interest for us in a demonstration, and then we contact the companies which could potentially be partners. Now I'm talking about product or sensors which don't exist nowadays because this is research. So we are not building commercial products as a research institute. We are having demonstration and prototypes. I hope this answered your question.
Yeah,
I can go long more.
Yeah, we have a question here, or like an actual comment, I think, from Klaus in the audience. So I'm just admitting him to talk now. Klaus,
Yes.
you had some perspective.
So can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just I attended a project on endoscopy. I think it was with Simula 5 years ago. And one of the challenges was the sharing of data. And the company I worked for at the time was very skeptical of, they wanted to have a proprietary solution. But now I think it's working towards more open source and more data sharing. And at that time, Apple launched the Apple Research Kit, and that was the first time they did not have a proprietary solution, actually opening for sharing data between different OS operating systems. And also that was a trend that I see, that people have to be more open. Is that something that still is going on, that we are moving more and more towards open data sharing? I see FHIR and HL7 is very good in terms of transferring or sharing data, but you see that continuing to go towards open source and sharing of data?
Okay, so did you catch that question, Michael? Or I think I think that was for you.
Yeah, I think you can see that when we started with making our first dataset open available, there was almost nothing out there. So there was like, I mean, when I started working on the endoscopy case, the first dataset we got was basically 2 images and the Word file describing the images, which is like nothing if you want to do any analysis in it. And then the first thing we had to do was to kind of make open data available, which was it was challenging at the start because you don't know how to do it, what are the laws and so on. But after a while, we go into it. And now last year, we released the largest endoscopy dataset in the world, which has more than 1 million images. And this year, we will also release a similar image database for colonoscopy via these small camera pills. And we really, in the meantime, we released a lot of different other datasets. And I also know that other research groups and companies also started doing the same kind of, following us. And you can see there's a kind of a bit of a global trend to do that. Of course, in the US, it's a bit different. I think they're a bit more against open data, and especially because the big companies there, like Google and Facebook, they own a lot of the data, and they are not so, yeah, it's a hard competition there, I think. So there's a kind of trend towards more data sharing, open source, but also on the other side, it depends a bit on the countries and the cultural differences, I think. Especially in the EU, I feel that we are on a very good way of sharing and caring.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a really good reply. What could you kind of repeat the question, Michael, that Klaus asked? Just because there were some questions in the audience about, what kind of question that he asked, because the sound quality was a bit bad.
Yeah, so I hope I understood it correct, because the sound quality was a bit bad. But the question was, I think, is there a trend towards more data sharing and open source nowadays compared to the past?
exactly. That's great. That is correct. I have a confirmation from the audience there. Yeah, Rodica, I was just wondering about kind of the process of kind of getting funding, together with the company. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that's we will kind of move then towards this subject area of funding in the end here, because obviously it's challenging for some startups to think about working with researchers. Some companies, large companies, have a lot of financing and funds, but that's not the case for everyone. And I can ask like a question for both of you. The funding does not have to be in place for them to contact you, right? You kind of you talk together, and you find this kind of path towards a collaborative platform. But how do you approach that, Rodica? And maybe I'll send that to you afterwards, Michael.
Yes, that is correct. So when a company approaches us, usually the funding is not in place unless they want to pay 100% for a project with us, but it's not usually the case with a small company or a startup. So we have a dialogue, and there are very good opportunities from the Research Council with joint industry projects and with different level of possibility for funding from the Research Council. So what we usually do, we discuss together about the project idea. It's usually not a complete project when a company approaches us. They have some idea for their part, and they would like to see with us what could we think of using that idea in. So we usually have a mixture of our ideas and their ideas, and we build up a proposal. And usually in this proposal, sometimes we also try to involve larger players, larger industry companies, and of course decide which is the best call from the Research Council. We notice sometimes that the Research Council possibilities for funding is not very well known within the startups or in small companies. So I see, for instance, NORA's startup as a big important having a big important role here with the startup. And this is, of course, a natural case, because usually the large companies, they have a big administration part which is handling this, and they are much more acquainted with the system. But we collaborated with startup companies, and we are probably the first collaborators in joint industry projects, and it went very well. So I think I don't see a problem in such a collaboration.
Okay, great. That's a really good answer. Thank you, Rodica. Michael, what are your thoughts?
So for me, funding is the kind of second important thing to decide if I work with someone, because my time for this project is quite limited, because I have a lot of other kind of research related projects. So it doesn't really matter if there's money for that or not, because it couldn't buy more of my time anyway. So that's kind of restricted there. And for me, it's most important if it's interesting and if I see potential. And if I do that, I sometimes also invest my free time to just help out. Because some startup companies, they just need a bit startup at the beginning to get kind of the basics right, and then they can fly along. So I think if I can, that's how I decided. And sometimes, of course, we go into projects. We're writing in BIA and these kind of things. We also have industrial PhDs. So it depends a bit on how big the challenge is that we want to solve.
Okay, so kind of many paths to Rome, so to speak, for you.
Yeah.
I think we probably will start rounding off now, and I think we went a little bit into that, and now kind of I think Rodica, you mentioned this whole role of NORA.startup. Why are we doing NORA.startup in the first place? And the whole this established organizational functions in larger companies to think about how to approach researchers as opposed to smaller companies. with a lot of expectations and potential misunderstandings and so on and so forth. But more broadly, which role do you think NORA startup should play? And how should it how should NORA startup work? That's that's a really kind of broad question to end on, but I think it's also very important, because every single webinar we do is a bit of a learning process, learning from you what you think NORA startup should be doing. So I just wanted to put that question out there. It's Morten's question, Morten Goodwin. He always asked it, but I do think it's a good note to end on.
Yes, and I guess there is not only one answer to that question, so I'll try to give some input from my side. I think I see NORA Startup as a common arena for a bridge between researchers and smaller companies. So maybe organizing some conferences, some like you are doing with the webinars, but of course it's quite restricted how much you can talk in a webinar. Sometimes it helps after the corona times when we can meet physically. Sometimes it helps to be in the same room. So a conference where one can come and present their maybe not idea, but a bit about what they are working with. Because it's important also to make a difference of when we have a joint project with the startup. It's important to differentiate between the project and the startup itself, because in a project we have a certain regulation that we are bound by from the research council. We have contracts, we have which is not necessarily the same as the startup. So this is something that we need to differentiate. So I think these common arenas, maybe courses on what can be. I think Norwegian councils have a lot of courses, so I would suggest to attend those courses to see what kind of funding possibilities are. In contrast to Michael, for me, for instance, my time is bound to have a project on that to be able. We do have some basic funding, but it's limited. It's very limited. So then it's usually I can work with the company if we have a common project which pays for my time. So it's slightly different approach.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's really good feedback, and I think we will kind of gather every single answer from the different webinar at some point and put it together. How about you, Michael? How should NORA startup work? What should they do?
So I think what I would like to see is kind of a series of workshops, maybe where you can teach or communicate some of these basics about how to really evaluate your algorithms, how can you share data even if it's sensitive data, and why should you share data, and these kind of things. Like so that these basics that a lot of startups often ask kind of are covered in a more general way, which I think would lead to a very good basis for Norway for startups and companies in general.
That's a very good point, and perhaps also we could organize sort of like more industry-specific workshops in a way too, with people that are very competent in those areas. We also have so many different collaborators that we're bringing on into some larger projects that hopefully will go through soon. So I'm sure there's a lot more that's going to happen within that. So stay tuned. But thank you so much for participating, and we truly appreciate it. I'm sure the audience appreciates that you took the time today, Michael and Rodica. I think I just wanted to wish you both a wonderful Friday and a happy weekend. Enjoy it. So thank you.
Thanks a lot. Same to you.
Thank you. Same to you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.